you've got basically three scenarios that run from rebound to recession, and the impact on the OEMs that produce aircraft are really quite dramatic from one end of the spectrum to the other. Can you walk us through what will determine whether or not we get the more benign outcome, the rebound, or the really horrible outcome, the recession?
Yes, hello, Guy, and thanks for having me on this call. There's really two factors that will matter and that we will have to check in the near future. First of all, the question to which level of air traffic we will come back after the crisis. Will it be like before, 100%, or considerably less? Because, for example, behavior of passengers may have changed, like less business travel, for example. That's one key assumption. And the other one is really the question whether the growth rates, which we have seen in passenger travel in the past years, almost 5% per year, whether those will continue or not.
Okay, so let's assume that we end up with a scenario in which we do see a significant decline in the number of aircraft that are demanded by the carriers. How are we going to find ourselves in this? What are we going to see in the sector in terms of the response to that? How are the big OEMs, how are the tier 1, tier 2 suppliers going to adjust as a result of this reduced demand?
Well, it really depends on the scenario. If we go for the scenario 2, which we call delayed cure, we will see approximately 30% less aircraft demanded, new aircraft, than what originally was anticipated. While this sounds quite a bit, it's not that dramatic because in the anticipation, which was about 22,000 aircraft for the next 10 years, a lot of rate increases, which still would have to happen, have been factored in. No? So we're not falling 30%, we're maybe falling 15% or maximum 20%. Yeah? If we go to the extreme scenario, which is recession, yeah, then the fall is 50%, yeah, which in net would probably be around 40% or so, which is significant, yeah, which means that an industry which has geared up to growth over the past years all of a sudden needs to downsize.
What does that look like, Manfred? I mean, this assistance is billions and billions per airline, American getting 5.8, Delta 5.4, and on and on. And yet it still looks like it will only help them limp through the next few months.
Well, of course, today we don't know what kind of aids will be given to which kind of airlines. Yeah? But I think it's a safe assumption that some of the money, especially if I look to the US or to Europe, will also be tied to conditions. Yeah? And one of the conditions could be that airlines are being asked to retire older aircraft for the benefit of buying new aircraft. And that would have two benefits. One, the aircraft industry could be kept alive. And two, there would be advances in terms of sustainability and climate protection. Because new aircraft are much more fuel efficient, so less carbon consuming or carbon emitting than older aircraft.
So we do actually know some of the conditions for the US aid. Right now, the government will require the large carriers to repay some at low interest, and the Treasury also has the ability to take stock warrants, so it could, you know, reap some benefit on the upside. Do you see that happening across the globe for European airlines and others? Is it a good solution? Is that enough of a repayment?
Well, generally speaking, this industry is a fairly global industry. Yeah? And out of fairness and I would say fair competition, whatever happens in one continent, I think the other continent will be looking at it, yeah? In order to ensure a level playing field. Still, it is a little bit too early to say exactly what's going to happen. I think first airlines need to, on an individual basis, check out what their liquidity situation is. Then there needs to be discussions with individual governments. And as you can imagine, Europe is a little bit more complex than the US, since there's a lot more governments. Yeah? And then things will sort of fall in place.